Many people want to move overseas and leave Australia to start their life somewhere new. Maybe it's a job, maybe it's a relationship, or maybe it's just an adventure. Today, we're going to be talking to someone who moved to Singapore and find out his take on it. Welcome to the Secret Men's Business Podcast. This is Joey Buzzatall, and on today's show, I've got a very good friend of mine who has had the Singapore transfer and lived in Singapore for many years, and he's going to be telling us all about it. I'd like to welcome to the show John Gillman. John, how are you?
Hi, Joey. I'm good.
Thank you for taking the time out. I know that you've been very busy. You're in Melbourne at the moment, right?
I am in Melbourne. I'm from Melbourne. I live in Singapore, but I've been stuck here for almost 5 months now because I can't get back into Singapore.
So tell us a little bit about, I guess, what's that like being in Melbourne? Do you consider yourself to be a Melbourneite, or do you consider yourself that you're not at home? Like, how is that whole feeling of being in lockdown in Melbourne because of coronavirus and not being in your current residence? What are you feeling, that you miss it, or are you okay with it?
Look, I don't really. So my family's in Melbourne, so I don't really miss it all that much. You know, Singapore is home at the moment. I'm staying with family in Abbotsford. I did not think I would be here for 5 months, and I think I've got 2 or 3 months ahead of me. So, even though my apartment that I'm renting is in Singapore, I'm here at the moment. But look, it's one of the things about my life over the last 4 or 5 years is, for my job, I've traveled a lot. So I think I moved over there about 4 years ago. The first 6 months, I lived out of a suitcase. I didn't even have an apartment in Singapore because I was traveling so much. The second year, I clocked up about 80 boarding passes, I think. So I traveled again a huge amount. So I felt, it's great to have been there, but in a lot of ways, I feel a little unsettled, and that's one of the things about being on your own. And living in another country, if you travel a lot, that can be where you get to.
Yeah. So let's go back to the beginning, because I've known you for a while now, and you've had very good, successful jobs in Melbourne. So I guess, what was the main reason that you started looking for a job overseas? Was it the job that called you there, or did you want to move?
So look, most people have a goal to move overseas or work overseas at some point, and that was part of the plan. Look, it happened, in a good way. So I started working for Fitbit in Melbourne about 5 years ago, and the company decided, as part of the focus on Asia, to set up a regional headquarters in Singapore. So I was given the opportunity to move over to Singapore with the job. Of course, I said yes to that. I spoke to my family, my kids, and
they said, "Go and have fun."
Everyone was like, "Yeah, just go." I think I was excited and a bit, reticent in some ways. But it was a great opportunity, and living overseas, or living somewhere, that's different to Australia. And Singapore is very different to Australia. It's in so many ways it's so different, but in a lot of ways it's quite similar. Has been a tremendous opportunity, and I do really love living there.
So I love going to visit you there, by the way. Twice now. I don't think I would have ever gone to Singapore if it wasn't for you. So thank you for that. Like, I don't think it would have been a destination for me, but I remember you coming to Melbourne and saying, "Right, I've got a pool, get a book, just come." And I thought, God, this is such a generous offer, and thank you for that. Like, so when you first got there, I know you said you were traveling a lot, but what were some of the things that you had to, I guess, adapt to? What were some of the big things that you noticed wasn't Melbourne?
Well, Singapore is not exactly a hardship posting. It's a very international city. It's probably the leading destination for expats in Asia Pacific, because so many companies have their regional headquarters based there. And it's very appealing, particularly if you have a family, or somewhere to live. So it's in some ways culturally it's very different to Australia, but in others it's quite similar. I think the really exciting thing about Singapore is when you go beyond I guess the kind of expat lifestyle, like you get out into the sort of outer areas of the island. It's not that big. It's a relatively small place. But if you go and try and live like a Singaporean lives and eat in the food centres, kind of off the beaten track, that's where you get the most benefit. And really start to understand, what makes the country tick, and what people do there that's different to Australia.
I cannot believe this is the thing that I love about you, right? I said, what is the biggest thing you have to adapt to? And you did not mention the weather. The one thing that I noticed when I first got there was, oh my God, how hot it was. So I'm guessing that you didn't care about the humidity and the storms and the rain and that heat. Like, you obviously, I know you love it, but did you love it straight away?
Well, look, well, put it this way: it's very nice to be back in Melbourne and actually have a winter. I'm probably one of the few people here who's rejoicing in freezing cold weather. Look, the thing about Singapore is it is incredibly hot and incredibly humid the whole time, and it makes me laugh. If the temperature's below about 23 or 24 degrees, people literally start losing their mind. Very early on, I turned meeting, and I would just, I work for fitness. It's pretty relaxed. I usually just wear t-shirts. And I turned up to this meeting, and people were wearing puffer jackets in the boardroom, and it was because the air conditioning was pretty cold. But it is really hard to get used to.
But you are a bit of you're also unusual, aren't you? I mean, tell the listeners that what you do with transportation. How do you get around Singapore? Which is, to me, being in that heat, I find odd, but you obviously love it. Like, how do you get around?
Well, I work for Fitbit, so I walk a lot. I'm a pretty obsessive walker. And look, you get used to it after a while. I mean, when I go back to Singapore after this, it's going to take a bit of getting used to again, because I've been, in Melbourne where we have weather, and I'm going to go back to Singapore where it's, pretty much 27, 28, 20 degrees every day and hot. So if I start walking again, you just accept that you can.
Yeah, well, that's cool, because I know that it's. I remember going for like some long walks with you, and I was whinging and complaining at the beginning, but I did enjoy it. Until my feet started hurting, and you said, "Oh, I'm going to go do another 20 k's," and you left, and I went to get a taxi. But I guess have you found it easy to make friends? Have you found it easy to connect with the community, or do you feel that that's something that takes a while?
So there's a whole expat network in Singapore because there's such a big population. But when I moved there and eventually got an apartment, I decided that I didn't want to live in one of the expat areas. So because I was part of a relocation, I had a relocation consultant who I spent a few days with, and drove the poor woman crazy because she kept showing me these apartments, and I was like, no, I don't want to live where, in a building full of other Australians or, people from other countries that have relocated to Singapore. So I eventually ended up in, an area that is, it's really interesting. It's a great area. It's not too expatty. It's probably become a bit more expatty since I've been there. But it's just a good way to really get to know the country if you're living outside, what is probably comforting to you. And a lot of people, some people don't want to do that. Some people want to live around, other expats. I saw it as an opportunity to, try and find somewhere that was a little bit more Singaporean, I guess.
I mean, you live in a beautiful area. I have to admit, I loved that whole, what's that area called in front of your apartment block? What's the name of that area?
Oh, it's the
Arabic area, isn't it?
Yeah, around Arab Street. Yeah,
Arab Street. Like that's
Haji Lane, Arab Street. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's very cultural and all that. So, has there been any cultural differences that you have struggled with? Are you a mutable person that can just go anywhere and just settle in?
Look, I think I'm pretty adaptable, and I can settle in. One of the things about Singapore, and it's a great place, and they do a really great job to make it friendly and welcoming. But it's in a lot of ways it's sort of known as Asia Light because it is quite Western. So it's not a difficult place to adapt to. And you create your own world really. You can go to Singapore and live a Western lifestyle, or you can go to Singapore and eat sort of $3 noodles from a food center, off on some sort of remote part of the island, and that's part of the fun of being there, and I love doing that. Walking for me is about keeping fit, but it's also about exploring.
Yeah.
And if you get a bit sweaty doing it, then that's the price to pay for sort of discovering Singapore.
Yeah. I guess, that the point that you're making then, because it is known as one of the most expensive cities in the world, and it's got quite an affluent, I remember talking to a taxi driver about the cost to have a car there, right? And
Yeah.
so have you found that has that impacted you, or do you just go back to what you were saying, you can just ignore that wealth and just have a easy life?
So in some ways it's expensive, but in other ways it's very cheap. So public transport there is very cheap. Uber doesn't exist there, but Grab is the competitor or the Uber equivalent there. I think about half the price of Uber in Australia. Obviously, rent is very expensive. Drinking alcohol can be very expensive there, but it also can be very cheap if you have a beer at a food centre. Um, you know, I'm surprised to hear that people think that. In fact, the data bears it out.
Mm.
But it depends on the lifestyle that you choose to have.
Yeah,
If
I
you want to
think
go
that's
out,
that's
then
the point,
obviously
isn't
have
it? Like, if you want to stay and go to a luxurious restaurant or a hotel, then it's going to cost money. But when I visited you, I quite, we had a really good time doing things, and one of the things that you love was the going to. I remember you getting me on a train going to this massage place. In my head, I pictured this luxurious, like spa place, and we get to this shopping center, and it's just like corner tucked away, but it was the best massage. You were right. So it doesn't really, you don't
um,
need to spend hundreds of dollars to have an experience, right?
yeah, and yeah, well, that's right. And look, Chinese massages are everywhere in Singapore, and they're so cheap. And you're right, I think it was the People's Park Centre, which is this fantastic, very Singaporean Chinese shopping centre. As a foreigner, you probably wouldn't go in there, but once you get to know the place and you get to know the secrets,
They were
it's
brutal though,
certainly
weren't
worth
they?
doing.
Brutal hands. That woman that massaged me, I'm thinking this is going to be really gentle. She literally broke my back in about seven places, and I'm going, okay, I'm just going to go with this. um,
I'm
in
I'm
Go on.
I'm sure you probably felt a lot better afterwards.
I did.
Yeah.
In regards to the actual, not that we're trying to make this interview about Singapore, because it's more about you, but I'm interested to know how you dealt with some of the political elements of Singapore being, that sort of where everything's clean and everyone is obedient. How have you found that? Have you found that to be appealing as an Aussie, or do you like coming into Australia and experiencing the naughtiness that we have?
Naughtiness.
It's naughty. It
Um,
is naughtiness because everyone's so polite in Singapore, and the streets are so clean, and you sort of feel like you have to behave there. But after a while, you realize, oh, wow, this is actually quite nice to be in a place that's clean, and
yeah,
everyone is sort of orderly. It's not rude, or you know what I mean?
yeah. Look, it's an interesting place. It's a fascinating place, and it's different to Australia. And the government, needs to be congratulated for a lot of the things that they've done around, just making it a place that fundamentally works for people. I mean, there are so many things to like about Singapore. There are things to that's challenge and that are different to what you're used to in Australia. But the focus there is to create a high quality of life for as many Singaporeans as possible. Not to really leave people behind, and to focus on how they can make a better place for
Mm.
everyone. The politics are a bit different to Australia. The politics are different to America. But if what's going on in some of these countries, it may not be such a bad thing, but
Mm.
the focus, the cleanliness, people, it's really appealing to a lot of people.
Mm. I mean, one of the things that I totally love is the infrastructure and how quickly things get done there. Like, in the time that in between visits of visiting you, I just could not believe how much infrastructure was created, which in Australia would take years and years and years. It was just
Yeah,
unbelievable. Like, it's just, how they can take like a swamp area and build that beautiful, just they have this gift. Is that because is there a need to do that because they want Singapore to be a tourist destination, or is it just the way that it works there that things get done efficiently?
Um, there was a realization years ago that, for Singapore to be successful, they needed to invest in infrastructure. And, the airport is a good example. Air travel at the moment is a bit of a challenge. Public transport, the train network is another good example. I mean, fundamentally, moving people around is really important. And that's one of the reasons why it's so expensive to buy a car there is because they really don't want people to have cars. They want people to use public transport.
Okay.
And my apartment is close to two train stations. In fact, one is below the building and one is across the road. I generally catch the train to work and walk home because if I don't want to get to work and be sort of suffering from sort of 78, 90 to 80% humidity. I'll get to the top of the escalator to go down to the platform, and if a train's pulling out, literally by the time I get to the bottom of the escalator, another train will arrive. And it was a bit of a game for me to see how close the trains could be. And one morning, it was literally 20 seconds between trains. I came back. I come back to Melbourne quite often, but I was staying out at Glen Iris a couple of years ago, and went to the Taronga railway station, and just missed a train. And I had my Singapore mindset happening, and I thought, there'll be another one in a minute or two. It was a Sunday, and I was sitting on the platform for 38 minutes waiting for the next train.
So yeah,
obviously the factors are a little different, but that sort of efficiency is really important. And I think if we had sort of significantly better public transport here, people may not drive as much or see the need for a car.
Yeah. Finally, I just want to ask, there's been a lot of talk around my circle of friends about when this coronavirus thing ends. A lot of people want to skip town and go and live somewhere else. So I guess, what advice would you give someone that wants to either move to Singapore or even consider moving overseas? Like, what are some of the things that you have to consider that we may not be thinking about?
Look, I think it's a great thing to do. And, if you're young or you're older, I'm older, it's a great opportunity to experience the world, to live somewhere. When you travel and you're a tourist, you might spend a few days somewhere or a week or two at best. But when you live overseas, it gives you such a great life experience, and it exposes you to a whole bunch of different things that you don't necessarily see, when you're a tourist. I think with post-COVID, it's going to be a different world, and it's going to be challenging for a while. It's probably going to push back some plans that people have to do it. But, if the opportunity arrives, absolutely do it. And look, I love Singapore, but there are plenty of other opportunities that come up around the region, sort of around the world. I think just absolutely go for it. And the thing is, it's not always easy to just front up somewhere and try and find a job. Like Singapore, you can't really do that. You have to be sponsored to get in. You need to sort of think about it and plan for it, and look for opportunities. And in some respects, it's it's kind of easy to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, had you been to Singapore before you got the job, or was it all brand new?
I'd been to the airport, and that was it. So it was all brand new.
I love that. I love that. So, do you recommend that, or do you think that certain people have to go and try it before they move? Because that's what makes you adaptable, right?
Yeah.
Some people might go, I don't like this smell, or I don't like this food, and then it's too late. So, would you recommend just going with it, or do you recommend experiencing it? Just what's the John Gillman's approach?
It depends on the kind of person you are. Like I would just do it. I would just go for it. No issues turning up. I literally didn't even go to Singapore before I got the job and was moving to Singapore. It was like, I arrived one day and had to find an apartment.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to live my life that way, being really spontaneous and taking the opportunities that come up. But look, I know people who couldn't do that, people who, want to meticulously plan everything and get their apartment. The thing for me, and part of the reason why I didn't get an apartment straight away was because I was traveling a lot, but I wanted to, explore Singapore and understand where I wanted to live. Otherwise, I probably would have ended up in one of the expat areas, surrounded by a whole bunch of other Australians, or lots of Brits there. But I wanted to explore a bit before I settled down, which is again a personal preference that might freak some people out, but
Yeah. I mean, I do want to ask you one more question. Sorry, like, because you're in Melbourne, do you feel that you can do your job here and you don't need to go back?
I can absolutely do my job here. What COVID? No, I'm a big fan of working from home. So Fitbit's pretty flexible. So I would probably work from home 2 to 3 days a week. Uh, you know, a laptop and a mouse, and I could pretty much work from anywhere, and Wi-Fi as well. I could pretty much work from anywhere.
Yeah.
Look, I need to go back to Singapore because that's where my job is obviously based. The thing is, when everyone's working from home, when everyone's on a Zoom call, it doesn't really matter where you are.
Yeah.
But when people start going back into the office, and that's going to happen soon in Singapore, I'm going to be the guy, sitting on the Zoom call in Melbourne when everyone's kind of, eventually sitting in a room around, the Fitbit office. So look, I need to get back at some point, but
Yeah. Are you able to get back earlier? Like, would you get exemption to go back, or are you stuck here?
I can go back if I want.
Sure.
I was actually going to go back in August until things started to, in July until things started to decline. Because the thing for me is I don't want to go back and do my 14-day quarantine in a hotel.
Right.
I want to go back and do it in my apartment. So when things ease off, and Singapore's put restrictions in for people from Victoria, so it would be hotel quarantine. There's no, Fitbit's got fantastic policies globally. There's no pressure on me to go back. So, I'm thinking probably in the next 2 to 3 months, I might eventually get back to Singapore.
Cool. All right, John, thank you so much for taking the time out to tell us all about your transition to Singapore. It's been a pleasure to see you again and to talk to you. So hopefully I can come to visit you again soon.
Yeah, well.
Because you've got the best pool in Singapore, I reckon.
It's a pretty good pool.
It is a good pool.
Resort style living in Singapore.
It is.
Resort style living.
Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, Joey.
Thank you. You've been listening to the Secret Men's Business podcast, out every Monday. So don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, Podomatic, and Google Manager.